Okay, let's start somewhere. Right, I'm going to make something pretty much just out of my head. I've kind of got a rough idea what I'm going to do, but I'm not really sure. So I'm kind of making it up as I go along. First thing I would like to do is create a base plan. I'm going to do it using a spline, but we're going to want to snap to the grid. So let's first of all let's click into the top view. All right, and then I'm going to here enable snap, and then we're going to enable snap for splines, and then we want the work plane snap, grid point snap, and grid line snap. So we turn all of those on, because that way now we can go up to here and go a linear spline, and then we can say click, let's see how we're going to do this. Let's go, stay there, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 to there, and then up 2. We can just use the wheel mouse to zoom in and out. We'll do 2 across, 2 down, and then 1 in. Holding button 1, you can click and drag the screen around as well. We'll go down, say 4. There. What was it? What was I doing? 2 or 1? It was 2, right? So 2, 2, 1, and then zoom out. Let's see to there. 1, 2, 1. Two. Do. Bomb. Hang on. What have I done? Oh, no, that's not right. Undo. Oh, so it's supposed to go 1 there. That's right. There we go. 1. Finally. We don't need to do the last one, because what we do is we click here, close spline. And then if you zoom out, that's going to be the floor plan of our building. So we go back to the top view here. Okay. So cool. With this spline, what I'm going to do is use the loft NURBS. The loft NURBS basically, if I put the spline inside there, you see it fills this area. Now if I create another one, so click, drag, hold, control, release, that creates a duplicate. Make sure we go back to object mode, select the pointer tool, and drag that up, and there we can see that that's it's kind of extruding it. But it's slightly different to normal extrude, because if we just turn the loft NURBS off for a minute, you can see how the way this is being built is it just basically fills in the gap between, and we can build up a number of these to create a different shape. Something I have noticed that I'm a bit concerned about, I'm just going to delete that spline for a minute, is my center point is wrong. So what I'm going to do is, with the spline selected, I'm going to go to this move axis tool, click that, and then I'm going to hold down shift and drag that to the middle point, so it's 200 there. So now the center is at that point there. I now want to put the whole thing back into the center of the grid, just for ease when I'm adding things later. So I turn that one off. Now the way I'm going to do this is use this minus PSR button. Boom, that puts it there. If you want this minus PSR, or minus reset PSR button, just right click, go customize palettes, do PSR, and then just drag that into your taskbar, into your bar there. And basically what that does is it zeroes out all of the position data for the object. So that's obviously quite useful. Right, so let's continue on. The next thing I do want to do is go to display and do with lines, just so it makes it so it's a little bit easier to see what we're kind of doing. Right, cool. Okay, so let's have a think. So we're going to take that up a bit. Now I'm going to create another one in there. Control, drag, release, and take that one up. And now I'm going to actually press T, and I can shrink that spline in, you see, and maybe move it up a little bit further. Then create another one. Move that up like so. Then I'm going to create another one, move that up, and this time I'm going to open that out a bit. I might move out a little bit further, move up and then another one, move that up and bring that back in this time. There we go, and maybe make one more, which we're going to send up, and that's going to be our peak. There we go. Right, so that's our building. Now I think I might just move everything from there up a bit, just to make that stand a bit taller, and the very bottom one I'm just going to make it a little bit wider, and the next one up just a little bit. There we go. Alright, so that's our initial shape. Now, as you see, that's kind of a bit roundy. We don't want it roundy like that, and that's because of this Phong tag. So if we put angle limit onto that, you can see that that actually now kind of pushes that in for us. That's great. I'll tell you what, I think that bulge is maybe a bit too big, so I'm just going to shrink that in a bit. There we go. Cool. So, yeah, that looks cool. Right, I like that. I like that a lot. So there's our basic shape for our building. The next thing I think I would like to do with it is put, I don't know, I think some lines. So I'm going to create a cube, which is obviously very small down the bottom there. See, at the moment this thing is actually huge, but we'll deal with that in a little while. Let's just adjust the size of this thing, this here. Probably want it, what, about 30 wide. It needs to be much taller. Back to the point and move that up. Right. So I think I'm going to go for about there. Maybe make it a little bit shorter. I pretty much am just making this up as I go along. We've still got snapping on, so I'm just going to switch off snapping because I don't want it trying to be clever. I want them to sit on the floor. There we go. Right. Okay. So that's one of our vents. I'm going to go for a bit of a heatsink look. But what I think I want to do, if we just turn this off a moment, I don't want this to be straight. So I'm going to put it in with, I'm going to put a taper deformer on it. Now that's appeared at the bottom, so what I'm just going to do is put that into the cube and reset PSR. That puts that in the middle for me. And then we can change the size of the taper. It's not that one. It's going to be that one and that one. Okay, so it's roughly around the right size, the same size as the cube. And then what we can do is, you see, with this we can actually move that around. Now something you may notice here, if I do it to the extreme, the cube doesn't follow that curve, it just kind of takes a shortcut. And the reason for that is there's no geometry inside the cube. Well, there is, but there's one. It's just literally one polygon. So here, under the cube, we can put the segments up. And the more segments, the more of a sort of refined curve we'll get. So I'll just put a few in there, because I want it a little bit curved, so maybe 20. I'm going to turn that back on. Now, obviously I don't want it to go out like that, but I do want it to come back in, to sort of disappear. Yeah, something like that. Okay. See, it's quite interesting what you can do with this, because you can actually turn that out, so like you can create some quite interesting shapes. So we've got it goes in there and then comes back out there. Here, if I just go into the render settings and just turn on ambient occlusion, it just makes it a bit easier to see because it puts a bit of shading. See, so that creates quite an interesting shape. But that's not quite what I'm looking for in this case, so I'm just going to do that up to about there. Curvature, that kind of allows us to sort of bold that out a little bit, so I'm just going to go for just a touch of that, just a little bit. Right, so now this is going to be one of our vents, or kind of thinking like a heatsink. So if we go to cloner, make sure the cube is selected, MoGraph and then cloner. By default the cloner clones upwards, you see, which is not really what we want, so we put that back to 0. I believe we want to go across the X. There we go, like that. Marvellous. We're going to want more than that, but let's just try and line them up a little bit better. Let's look in this view here. Go cloner, move that across. Probably about there, do we reckon? Cool, that looks good to me. Okay, and then we'll put the number up. Let's maybe move them a little bit closer together. Ah, it's too far over. Look, it's intersecting. We want it to sit about there. Maybe move in a little bit more. There we go. Then when we have a look at that, there we go, we've got our heat sinks. I wonder if they're a bit too much, so I might just bring the width in just a little bit. There we go. Cool, okay. So that's that side. I'm going to go up this side as well, I think, with some steps. So we'll have a cube again. This time I'm going to, let's just turn off the loft notes and our, let's just turn off all of that for the minute. Move that in, move that down. I don't want to move it across yet because I'm going to put it into a symmetry object. So hold down Alt, put it into the symmetry object. Now when I move the cube away, it creates a copy. So it saves us having to do it twice. So I can turn all that back on now. Right, and now I'm just going to move this. So it's in position, about there. Just a little bit back. Something like that, there we go. And then the cube we're going to put in the cloner, MoGraph cloner. Now this time it's actually right, we do want to go on the x-axis, so we just go up a few. Let's zoom out and have a look here. We'll keep adding. Go up to, say, about there. Now, something that you may notice here is that our steps are coming outside. Now, we don't actually want that, so we're going to use a bend deformer. What we want to do is make the bend deformer affect all of them, not just sort of each one individually like we have done on the vents. So what we do is we have to put the cloner into a null object. So with the cloner highlighted, press Alt-G, that puts that into a null, and then we're going to add a bend to the scene and put that into the null above the cloner. And then if we zero the PSR out on that, that puts that to there. We need to do a little bit of working out here. So the size up, we definitely know that wants to go bigger. We can move that up a bit there, like so. And make it a bit wider. So the bend is actually right, look. So, but it's maybe a bit too, we need to sort of think about the size a little bit. So if I put it so that the top one goes in, let's see, we need to tweak a little bit here to make it so that it's about right. This is one of those adjust to taste moments, I think. That's pretty cool. That's it, it seems to work. Let's have a quick look. Yeah, so we've got our shapes going and that's smart. Okay, and now I want a different shape just in here. So I'm going to create a cube. Just move it up. And let's make it so, oh, not that one, undo that. Drag it out, drag it up. Something like that. Nowhere near as far as that though, so maybe just that much. And I'm going to put a taper object in that one. Taper. Put that into there and zero PSR. Make it so it fits. Oh, not that way, it's that one. And curvature, bend that in. Add a bit of curvature. Not fillet. It's I know what the problem here is. It's upside down. So let's just rotate the whole thing. There we go. Oops, I'm moving the tape up. I wanted to move the cube. Just make it a little bit. What do I want to do here? Not that one. That one. There we go. Right. Oh, and the problem is because it's not curving in that same way because of the same reason as earlier. So we have to add. There we go. That was what it was doing. Right. So there we go. So I just want a bit of that going on. Slightly less curvature, I think. Maybe just move it out of it. There we go. And that just makes an interesting looking shape there. I think it's possibly a bit too tall. Yeah, there we go. Move it down a bit. Cool, okay. And final little piece of detail that I'm going to add is a rectangle. Let's bring that up. It's on the wrong plane at the moment, so we change the plane to XZ. Make it a bit bigger. It was T, I think we covered that earlier, didn't we? Rectangle, let's turn on a bit of rounding. Maybe put that to 50. And I'm going to use an extrude NURBS. So extrude, hold down Alt. There we go. Now by default, that's going off in that direction. We don't want that, so we zero that one. And we want it to come up a little bit. So 50, something like that. Let's put a fillet cap on both sides with 3 steps on each. Maybe 6 centimeters in constraint, but obviously that's whatever the hell you want that to be. And I'm going to move that down just so it sits there. And I want to just change the rectangle because I want it in a bit there, but I want it a bit longer there. Cool. Right. I've got one more thing. Actually, is that a bit too long? I think that's a little bit too long. There we go. Last thing every skyscraper needs, because it's how you make a skyscraper taller, is you need an aerial. So we're going to stick an aerial on the top. Not quite as thick as that. And something you can notice here is the amount of polygons in there, so we can just turn that rotation segments right down to about 16, because that's, I mean, even that's too many really. We'll probably go down to about 10. Okay, and then if we zoom out and have a look, there's our building. Cool, okay. So to texture this, I'm not going to go into too much detail. I was kind of more just into the actual building. But just to quickly, we'll give it some textures. We'll use some of the built-in stuff that comes in the content browser for now. But there's so much out there on texturing. You know, I'm sure you'll find something more suitable for this. But let's say we go into the content browser. I'm just going to use video just to light it for the moment so I can see. Now here's a couple of interesting points. Obviously this building is massive, so the scale inside of Cinema is massive. So I want to bring that down a bit. But there's a really useful thing to keep in mind. So let's grab all of the parts of the building, press Alt G, that's now in a null, and we'll call that building. Now the center point, you can see, I'm pointing at the screen, I don't know why I'm doing that, is right in the middle there. So that means if we press T and we scale it, it scales right from the center. Now that's not so useful when you're dealing with something like this. We actually want it to scale from the bottom. So let's go to the front view, and we'll use that same way we did earlier where we do the axis move tool, and we'll just put that right at the bottom. So we'll zoom in there and just place that just there. And remember to turn that off again when you're done. See now, if we press T and we resize the building, it stays on the floor. And we can do it like that. Okay, so let's actually put it on the floor. It wasn't actually quite on the floor. But now when we resize it, it resizes from there. So it's obviously very, very useful. And then if we now put our camera in a slightly more interesting position and hit preview render, There we go. That's just with the default lighting in the video, so that's looking pretty cool. I am going to just texture it very, very simply. If you've got the studio version, you will have this. If you've got Visualize, you'll have this. It depends what version you've got. But if you look in here, there's a materials one, and there's plenty of like outdoor surfaces, that sort of thing. So maybe asphalt. You could make the main building side of it asphalt. This is always a good idea to name your parts when it comes to this side of things. By the way, and maybe we'll use a darker one for our cloner, for our symmetry cube, and we want metal. We want something metal for the brushed titanium. Oh no, that one's perfect. Like metal. We'll put that on our. That's our aerial there. So just a real quick render out. There's our building. Our aerial is far too thick. Let's make that 2. Cool. All right. Obviously, spend more time on it. This is just to sort of get you going. The other thing you might want to do, I'll just quickly show you this. Let's say you don't either have in video, don't want to use in video. For the Andrew Kramer thing, obviously you don't want to do a scene. You only want to do the building and then texture the building. But it's just, it's always nice to have good lighting when you're texturing, because it makes texturing a hell of a lot easier. But if I go to Visualize, in here somewhere, I think it's under Objects, and then no, Materials, and then HDRI. This is it. We can actually put in like this cloudy. If we take away in video, we don't need that now, and we just render that. That looks pretty cool. Just 1 second. If we keep in video in, what does that do? Oh, okay, that's a combination. So that's a combination of that plus in video. So perhaps if we put the camera just here. Oops. Let's just turn off in video again. We'll get rid of that in a moment. Let's see, if we were to set this up, we would want something like, we want that kind of angle. I think the reason we want this, we want to use HDRI with this, sorry, global illumination. So let's just turn on, that was render settings, and we go physical. I want to make sure that I am in HD, because that's going to move my camera. Physical, don't worry about depth of field for now. Progressive, indirect illumination, set that to 2. This is the global illumination for the physical renderer. My ambient occlusion, I'm going to put up to 200 for the maximum ray length and 10 on the contrast. And we're just going to zoom that back out and just move that up a little bit, zoom it just in a touch. There we go. We need to create a camera, go into the position, there we go. Physical, yep, that will probably do. And then if we hit render, there we go, that looks much, much better. Much better indeed. So now, because we've put it to progressive, that will keep chunking through. So if I just, if I set it to do it properly, it's done 2 passes, so we'll let it just do a few passes. Okay, and there you go. So that's how you can create a nice, simple, futuristic building. Hopefully you can take that and do something much more amazing with it. I had a little play earlier, and I came up with a couple of, a design of a building like this, and then I set it in this kind of situation, sort of as if it was at night, and then I tried out some during the day, and I was just sort of playing around with different ideas and places. I think that was my favourite one. I like how that one looks. Yeah, and that's basically it.